What is going on, guys? Carter here with Edge Mindset. This is a first for the channel. I am doing a triple review. I have never actually done that before. In fact, I don't know if I've ever even done a double review. We are taking a look at 3 different knives from Poikilo blades. Now, they were nice enough to send me on loan a huge box of like 10 different knives. A few of them I had already featured because I had purchased that model myself, and what they sent me was a slightly different flavor. I featured that in the unboxing video if you want to check that out. It's a few videos back. But the rest I had not featured or handled. And it was very cool being able to check these out because especially these 3 right here, I've had my eye on at least one of these 3 for some time now. Now, why am I doing all 3 of these at the same time? Part of the reason is, the main reason is that they're similar enough that I think it makes sense to show them all off at the same time. As I was kind of handling these and playing with these and kind of thinking what I'm going to talk about in the review, most of the things carried over between all 3 of them because they have a very similar design language. They have a very similar mode of operation, and a lot of the things about them are pretty much the same. So we're going to talk about them all at the same time. So what do we have here? Up at the top, we have the Salvator. This is the Komodo, and this is the Marlin. Carve that in stone. That is the name of these knives. It is quite possible during the course of this video that my brain will get discombobulated and I will call the wrong knife by the wrong name. And I know, sure as I can breathe air, that you guys will let me know in the comments how I messed up and I said the wrong thing and I'm a big idiot for not saying the right thing. So I appreciate you guys keeping me in line and making sure that my connection between my brain and my mouth doesn't improve, but that you just call me out on that publicly. I really enjoy that. So, just kidding. Just kidding. That was a little passive aggressive. I'm just joking. It happens all the time though. You know, sometimes my brain is thinking one thing, my mouth says another. And then once I shoot the video and upload it, it's like cast forever. It's immutable, right? I can never go back and change it. And people just, until the end of time, make sure and point out that I messed up, which I'm fully aware of. So, all right, let's talk about this. How do we want to tackle this? This is my first threesome here. I got to go gentle with this. So let's do overall size. So what we'll do is we'll measure like one of them because they are very much the same in overall specs and things. I'm sure the weights are going to be quite a bit different, but we're going to find out here. So in general, we're looking at about 3 3/4 inch blade. And in general, we're looking at about 8.5 inches overall. My angle on my camera is still a little not quite flat, so it is going to kind of give an optical illusion to a certain degree. But you can see that for all intents and purposes, these knives are very, very similar. The largest one is probably the Salvator right here. We'll go ahead and give this one its own measure just to be kind of sure. This one is, because it's about a 4-inch blade. And then 8 3/4 inches. So it's about a 1/4 inch overall longer than the other 2. But in my mind, it's still within the same category of knife size. And maybe it's just the way I think, right? And I've said this before, I've never been somebody that really cares about millimeters or fractions of an inch. Insert joke here. I generally want, what is the overall gist of the knife? Is it small, medium, large? That kind of thing. So the Marlin is 4.7 inches. The Komodo, 4.7 ounces. The Komodo is 4.4 ounces. And then the Salvator, which I think is going to be the heaviest, it's the biggest, 5.2 ounces. So not too bad. For knives this size, not too bad. So they're all frame locks. They all run on bearings. They are all titanium knives. Let's flip these over here so you can get a good look-see. These all come in a similar price point. This particular version is the M-Tech version on the Marlin here, so it has Zircuti. And look at the Zircuti on this backspacer. I've never seen it done like this before. I mentioned this in the other video. I don't even know how this is done. Typically, you see it kind of sandwiched this way so that the grain goes this way, because you're basically taking a 1/4 inch piece of Zircuti, and then you're making a backspacer out of it. With this, it would have to be, 6 inches of zircutai. I don't know, unless they do it a completely different way, but very, very cool. You can see the milling going on in there. We'll just pick on this guy. We'll pick on this guy first. Got the harpoon. That's the main standout feature for me, is the harpoon. Thumb studs right here. I mentioned how it's got this interesting hole, almost as though they were going to put dual thumb studs and then change their minds. Another similarity between all of these is they all have essentially the same thumb studs on there. They're kind of on the smaller size. The Salvator appears to be slightly larger than like the Marlin, but functionally they're very much the same. Maybe it's an optical illusion, but it does almost seem like these are a little bit bigger, but it's kind of an odd choice to do custom thumb studs on this model, but then have them be so similar. But yeah, I don't know. This one has the kind of light acid wash with satin flats. You got a nice fuller here. They all have a very similar geometric handle design, right? None of these are kind of their bio style, which is very organic and curvy and soft. They all have kind of these harsh angles with just different handle designs. You've got fullers going on here. You got the nice flats on the titanium. They're all frame locks. Pocket clips are different but similar, right? They're all kind of that popsicle style. They all have about the same amount of depth in there, and they all are good in the pocket. I've tried all of these. This is probably one of the better ones, and then the Salvator is one of the better ones. The Komodo did kind of bind up a little bit with the relief cut right there, but nothing too crazy going on with pocket wear going in and out of the pocket. All of the action on all three of these are superb, super smooth, drop shutty, what you would expect from Poikilo, right? They know what they're doing. Now, one of the gripes that I've heard on these knives, and I would have to agree, and I did touch on this before, is the thumb studs being so small. It can be, I don't know if I want to say difficult to get in there, but it feels a little uneasy as you're trying to do it, especially the reverse flick. With the reverse flick, I feel like I'm barely getting on it. You can kind of see, you can kind of feel that corner right there on your index finger, and you almost think it's not going to work out, and then it does. So I haven't actually really had problems per se deploying any of these knives, but it doesn't give me that kind of reassuring feeling that you would get on some other knives in terms of deployment. The Salvator is the worst offender as far as reverse flicking goes. In fact, a lot of the times I can't even get in there. You can see how close it is to that frame right there, and it just kind of almost sits completely flush, right? It just doesn't, and that's kind of how all of these thumb studs are. They don't really sit very proud of the scales, but the Salvator here is the worst of the bunch. Thumb flicking's fine, but reverse flicking gets a little problematic. When we're talking about the blades on these, they're all kind of funky, right? We've got interesting angles going on. This is like a Japanese tanto style on the Salvator here. It is compound ground, but not really significant, right? It's kind of more for decoration. You can barely feel the lip between these two, but technically this is a more acute angle here, so it is going to be a little thinner behind the edge than back here, which is usually the opposite of what you see on a compound ground blade. But like I said, it's so slight. I mean, it's really not even hardly worth mentioning that it's compound ground. A lot of angular shapes going on. This one is, I don't even know what you call this blade shape. It's got this like hump with this wedge on top, and then this slight curve on this front edge with a very short back edge. So probably the more unique blade shape out of all of these. Very high tip on this guy, but I guess it's about the same on all of these. Yeah, in fact, I guess the tip is actually lower on this one, but because of this long lead up, it kind of gives the illusion that it's really high, but it's considerably lower than the Salvator here. And let's see, let's check the Marlin. Yeah, Marlin as well. Yeah, the Marlin has a much higher tip. Now, in terms of usability, the Marlin's probably the more classic, right? You've got this nice belly right here. This is the more usable knife design out of all of them, but they're all a little bit funky and a little bit interesting. In terms of ergonomics, they're all decent and very similar. I would say that the most comfortable is probably the Komodo here, with a second being the Salvator, and then the Marlin is the least comfortable because you actually hit this corner quite a bit. Unless you choke up and kind of get this corner out of the way of your hand. Maybe if you have smaller hands, it's not a big deal. But for me, that corner kind of hits right in my palm. So out of all three, I would say that this guy is the weakest in terms of ergonomics. Now, when you talk about action, like the fine details of the action, I have noticed that the lock bar on the El Salvator is pretty stiff, and it's probably the least comfortable to get in and disengage for some reason. I can't quite figure out why, because visually it looks like you would have plenty of room in there compared to the others. Maybe it just is that extra lock bar tension. Some of this you have to take with a grain of salt. These aren't all brand new right out of the box. I forget which ones I opened and then which ones were kind of floor models that have been passed around, or EDC knives. So you do have to somewhat take that with a grain of salt. I didn't crack all of these open fresh, I don't believe. And so it's possible that somebody tweaked with it, although I find it very unlikely. Now, these are minor things I'm talking about. For all intents and purposes, these are all amazing. They're all really well done, really cool knives. You would probably be happy with any of these. The only thing I would say is, like I mentioned, the Marlin with the ergonomics is a little off point with this back corner. Other than that, I think you're going to like any one of these knives. So pick the one that is within your budget, even though they're all very similar. Pick the one that looks the coolest to you, that kind of speaks to you from a design standpoint, and I think you are going to be happy with it. Actually, two things, right? So long story short, two things. Ergonomics takes a hit on the Marlin, like I said, and then reverse flick on the Salvator is almost non-existent, at least for me. Oh, I got it that time. I can barely get it. All the others are very much the same in terms of action and deployability and things like that. They're all very similar in size. They all have a similar design language. So it's almost like they're three different flavors of the same family. That's it. Comment down below which one of these three kind of sparks your interest the most. I'm curious to see what design people are gravitating towards. When it comes to looks, I actually like the Komodo the most now. It used to be the Marlin just because of that harpoon, but now that I have it in hand, I think this is the coolest looking one. It's the most ergonomic, and it has decent enough action that I think it's kind of the standout for me. But I'm curious to see what you guys think, if you like kind of these purple accents or... Oh, and the other thing is, some of these come in different versions. Not all of these are, you can get different flavors, colorways of these knives as well. So if you're looking at this and you're like, man, I don't like these satin flats. Well, I'm pretty sure the satin flats are only because this is the M-Tech, and the regular version of the, in fact, I know it is, the regular version of the Marlin is actually kind of just straight acid washed. So same thing with these, there's some different flavors of them. So comment down below, which one do you prefer out of all three of these? Thanks for hanging out. You guys take care. I am out of here.